in general, I mean, when we think about culture, we think about many, many things. But many of the things we think when we associate with culture are the arts and the achievements of the different empires that have been around the world. We think, for instance, of the great monuments, the pyramids or the Sphinx, in Egypt. We think, of course, of theater and the philosophy and the concept and notion of democracy from commercial Athens. We also think of Stonehenge. We think of the many pottery achievements and the architecture left behind by many peoples across Europe. We also think about the literature, the sculptures, and the great palaces and temples that were created by the Roman Empire across a very wide spectrum of our geography. We also think about Mesoamerican achievements, like the pyramids, the codices of the Mayas, or even the pottery that now is very valued in the world. We also think about the highway system, the quipus. We think also of Machu Picchu from the Incan Empire. We cannot, of course, not think about the great globalization of culture and the great trade of different ideas and achievements facilitated by the British Empire and its industrial revolution. But all of these empires have been defeated one way or another by an accumulation of threats, most of them unforeseen threats. For instance, we can think of the Mongols breaching the Great Wall of China, rounding it up, and actually showing the weaknesses of the Chinese civilization at the time. We can also think of the stubborn Russians and General Winter defeating Napoleon and annihilating its Grand Armée. But of course, they all left behind amazing things. For instance, when you think about the ideal beauty of the Greeks and how it was translated first to the Romans, and then it was revived by the Renaissance and becoming a new paradigm, which is pretty much very alive today. So, Winston Churchill had the clairvoyance of foreseeing in the middle of the last century that the empires of the future would be empires of the mind. And one such empire was represented at the turn of the century by the great majors of entertainment, that where these great corporations were integrating vertically the process of transforming ideas into the goods and services of a multi-billion industry. But they do, as an empire, had weaknesses. And with the click of a mouse in 1999, Napster shook the basis of these big empires. And of course, legal actions and the naivety and lack of experience of Napster creators let the majors retake or regain some control for a time. But the weaknesses of the system were shown. And hundreds first, and then thousands of entrepreneurs decided to take advantage of these little cracks in the system, and they are still coming. So the opportunities that are embodied by by the new digital age, for which the majors were not very well prepared, are what the orange economy is all about. It's about the book industry, which is perhaps the oldest of the industries, the one that allows us to reproduce something over and over again, keeping its quality, its original quality, but also the first cultural industry per se. And the reason we have an intellectual property system that allows us to trade with ideas, that allow us to trade with music and with many things. It's also about theater. And of course, how it can be presented in the most exquisite opera houses around the world, but also how it has a presence in the most humble of the public spaces. It's also about crafts and how they carry the identity of very particular communities, but also how they can inspire the most avant-garde designs that make our day-to-day life a lot easier and, of course, a lot prettier. It's also about carnivals and how carnivals are changing the paradigm of tourism for an experience tourism instead of the old paradigm of sand, sun, and sea. It's also about audiovisuals and how audiovisuals like TV and radio and movies were at the forefront of the cultural debate of the 20th century but they are not going to be anymore there because now we have video games. And video games is a very rapidly creative industry. It's probably the fastest creative industry right now. And you will see in these video games the narratives and cinematics of films, of TV, of literature. But you will also see interactions at a level that was not possible with the old creative industries. But of course, it's especially about how content, how our identity is mixed with technology because of today's possibilities and allow us to think about a different way of communicating. And behind all of this, we find a lot of intangibles. And intangibles are very difficult to measure. And it's very difficult to see what are their numbers. And it's very, very much also because for the last 2 centuries, we grew used to think about culture and economics as completely separate environments. And in order to understand how they come together, we have to think and understand that culture and economics are but 2 faces of the same coin. One represents the perfect quantitative value of many things, and the other is strongly associated with the identity, with the symbology behind many other things. But of course, when we have a coin in our hands, we can only see one of its faces. We have to make an abstraction exercise to see, to understand that they both live together. Of course, not everything is cultural and economic, but most of it it's there. And they have intersections. And it's in the intersections between culture and economics where we can find that the ideas, all the ideas, whether they are or not commercially viable, are part of an ecosystem that is very important to care, as well as the economy with all of its business possibilities, it's also an ecosystem. And when they intersect, they allow us to create many, many interesting things. And those things, that intersection, we can measure. And we have some numbers of that. Epaminondas was speaking about how about 6% of the world economy is the creative economy. That's the 4th largest economy in the world. It would be 20% larger than the German economy, or 2.5 times the world military expenditures, all 190 countries combined. It would be the 9th commercial power in the world, $646 billion of trade back in 2011, growing 138% between 2002 and 2011. It's about twice, actually more than twice, the Saudi Arabia's oil exports. It's the 4th largest workforce in the world, about the same number of jobs in all of the US economy. But to put these numbers in perspective, think about this power plant. It's the Three Gorges Dam in China, and it's the largest electricity plant in the world. It generates electricity for about 28 million households and hundreds of thousands of businesses. It took 30 years to plan it and build it. It cost $25 billion to the whole process, including environmental mitigation and the displacement and relocation of almost 2 million people. In the same 30 years, between 82 and 2012, the 10 top musicals from Broadway and the West End sold in merchandising and box office $27 billion. Not bad for a bunch of dancers and actors, right? The Observatory of Creative Industries in the city of Buenos Aires estimates that 1 in 10 jobs in the city are in the creative industries. And 9 out of every 100 pesos of GDP is added by these creative industries. Guy Laliberté started to live a dream in 1984. That dream is known today as the Cirque du Soleil. And the Cirque du Soleil employs more than 5,000 people and generates sales of more than $800 million per year. That's big and huge according to any standards in any industry. It's also these guys, the kids of the Recycled Instruments Orchestra in Paraguay. It's an amazing story. But to make a long story short, these kids come from the largest landfill in Paraguay, just right northwest of Asunción. They are very poor. They have traveled the world. Their vision, their ability to think about themselves to have a different kind of life than their fathers has been triggered by the possibility of playing instruments and music across the world. And just to show how this can actually change your life, they have been recently opening 7 concerts for Metallica in South America. That's the dream of any music. Imagine if you're a kid in a slum. But keep calm. This is just the beginning. That's why we need to all work together to make our efforts jointly in order to make the world understand that creatives, that artists, perform a real job as real as that of a politician, an economist, an engineer, a doctor, name it. And that job belongs to a value chain. In that value chain, you transform the ideas. You give life to the goods and services, the manufacturers, as I like to call them, of a new economy. The manufacture that can enrich our lives in more than one dimension. And in order to achieve that, to make that dream possible, we need to upgrade the paradigm of education. Ken Robinson Riley says, STEM is good. Science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. That's great. But you need to put also the dimensions of arts and design to enrich the creativity behind them and also to make them useful for people. Otherwise, you are not really doing that. And if we can do that, we can let everybody's dream to go from STEM to STEAMed. And of course, that will prepare us to put together this triangle, this virtuous triangle of sustainable innovation, where you have the talent of the creative being matched with the acumen of entrepreneurs, and then with the vision and the drive that can only be triggered by investors. If we can do that, we will have an explosion of new ideas and of new opportunities that will enrich our lives forever. So keep the dream on and help us squeeze the orange. Sas F. Haritu. Thank you very much.